through one of the most joyous seasons of the year, Advent. Lights sparkled and broke through the darkness on our trees and shrubs outside our home, and on Christmas trees and decorations inside our homes. We sang carols, and we drank hot chocolate and cider, and we ate more than we needed to, or at least I did. And we gathered in parties and lunches and dinners to celebrate the season. We came here to see preschool children reenact the Nativity. We welcomed Clark parents and Tillman families and heard them sing the teenagers and children sing the songs of the season. We decorated this place, our sanctuary, the place where we come every Sunday to celebrate Jesus' resurrection. We decorated it with evergreens and candles and creches and a manger. We celebrated with music. The choir took us around the world with a cantata, and we read the stories of Jesus' birth in Matthew and Luke's Gospels. We heard the angel Gabriel say to Mary, "Greetings, favored one, do not be afraid." And we heard an angel tell Joseph in a dream, "Do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife." And we could see the angels light up the night sky and heard them tell the shepherds, "Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid." These words echo throughout the Gospels. Jesus tells his disciples often, "Do not be afraid." Okay, really? Do not be afraid? Are you kidding? Have you looked at what's happening in our world? There are terror attacks in places where we once felt safe. We walk into movie theaters and stadiums and schools and places with large gatherings of people, and we're not as sure as we once were that we'll walk back out again. In preparation for those New Year's Eve celebrations, I know you saw it. Governments and cities around the world increased security, and we even got news of one plot that was foiled in New York State. I went to bed New Year's Eve wondering what I would wake up to the next morning. And when I woke up, I found myself checking the news first thing to see if anything had happened the night before. And now, with the internet, we wonder who's out there watching us. I mean, what once existed on paper, only on paper, now exists in digital form, bank accounts and social security numbers and credit card numbers. And we wonder if that information will fall into the wrong hands. And then there's our personal struggles. Will the IRA or the 401k make it through our retirement? And what about the health of our marriage? What about our health in general? There's disease and death and our children's futures and our spouse's future and our parents' futures. We could go on until we're paralyzed. Do not be afraid. How can we not be afraid? It all feels like madness. It feels like darkness. It feels like chaos. Which brings us to Genesis 1. In the beginning, when God began to create the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Those waters. In the Old Testament, water is chaos. Water symbolizes and signifies chaos. And so I'm not sure if that takes some imagination on your part to envision that, but that's not a stretch for me. Because you see, one of the times I look forward to most is our annual trip to the beach with friends in July and August. And I love to go, and I love to sit on the beach with a novel in hand and Chip or one of our friends at my side. I love to gaze out over that expanse of water. It's wide and it's endless, and there's water as far as your eye can see. I love to wade in the surf. I love to watch those breakers chase my feet. And I love to feel the surf around my ankles. And I also love to get out a bit from shore where there's waves just kind of roll gently and you can float or jump them or just roll with them. But what terrifies me is when the waters grow rough and the waves grow tall, and the only way to get out beyond them is to time it just right or to swim through them. Now, I'm not a great swimmer. I can sort of swim, but I'm just not a great swimmer. And swimming through those giant walls of water is not an option for me. And when I see one coming, because it just happens, I know what's going to happen. It's going to hit me like a wall. And I'm going to tumble over and over, and I'm going to be at the mercy of that wall of water, and I'm going to be thrown about wherever it wants me. And I will gasp for air, and I will pray that in a split second that I'll come out right side up. I can understand why the Hebrew people used water to represent chaos. I've been in that chaos. And here it is, right in the beginning of time, this tumbling, out of control, heaving, can't tell up from down mess. But God is there. And our scriptures tell us that God's Spirit is moving over these waters. The Hebrew word here is ruach, and it means wind or spirit or breath. And this ruach is the life force that is God and all that God is. And so God is moving over this chaos, and not even just moving, God is vibrating over this chaos. God is hovering over the deep, sweeping across it. I'm pretty partial to that word vibrating. God's Spirit is vibrating over the deep. So can you sense it? Here in the beginning is the Spirit of God, the wind, the breath of God, moving, hovering, vibrating over all this chaos. There's energy here that our English translation just doesn't do justice to. There is anticipation here. Something is going to happen. Wait for it. Watch for it. Something is getting ready to happen. It's like the warm-up before a symphony concert. As the time gets closer, you start to anticipate the beginning of the program, and there's a lot of chaos. People are milling around and they're talking. There's chaos in people finding their seats. Some people may get in the wrong seat. You have to switch seats. People are walking over each other and climbing over each other and trying to find the bathroom and coming back. And the people are walking around on the stage and trying to get settled. And then the first chair violinist comes out, and you know you're one step closer to the beginning of the program. And then there's more chaos as this orchestra starts to tune up. And then the conductor comes out and steps up. And with a simple wave of the baton, there's beauty and harmony and music. Well, in Genesis 1's first verse, we're anticipating. God is hovering and vibrating over this water, over this chaos, over this deep. And then God speaks. And like the first wave of a conductor's baton, harmony and beauty and order emerge. God speaks, and there is light out of darkness. Light is created. Light is now in the world for the first time. God continues to speak, and sky separates from water. God speaks, and dry land emerges. God speaks, and there are plants, the sun, the moon, the stars, and animals, and human beings. Everything is created because God speaks them into being. Beauty and harmony and order all emerge because God speaks. And verse 31 reminds us that it is all very good. And where there was once only chaos, now there is order and beauty. And where there was once only darkness, now there is a light. All because God speaks. Now at the very beginning of time, this very beginning of time, God brought beauty out of chaos and light out of darkness, and God continued to work and create and bring light out of darkness until it was time for the Creator to step into creation and become a part of it. And John's gospel says to us, "And the Word became flesh and lived among us." This Word, this life-giving, creating force, who is all God is, put on human flesh and lived right here in the middle of us, in the middle of human beings. And He taught, and He healed, and He showed us who God is. And just like in the beginning, He reminded us that He could still bring order from chaos. Mark's gospel, our earliest gospel, tells us how Jesus and His disciples were in the middle of the storm, and the boat is rocking, and the waves are crashing, and the chaos is maddening, and these experienced fishermen are terrified. And it must have been quite a storm for fishermen to be terrified. And the waters of the deep are heaving and hostile until the Word says, "Peace, be still." And harmony is restored. The Word speaks, and chaos becomes order. "Why are you afraid?" Jesus asked. "Have you still no faith? Don't you know who you're with? Don't we know who we're with?" Even in the midst of crazy, maddening, chaotic world events, we're with the one who spoke and brought order from chaos. We're with the one who spoke and calmed the waters. We're with the one who spoke and created light from darkness. And we look around at our world and even at our personal lives and what's going on, and the waves are crashing and the mountains are shaking and the waters are roaring and foaming, and all seems like chaos. All seems like darkness. But you know what? God has seen all of this before. And God created life out of that chaos. So what will it take for us to trust Him? Jesus calls us to trust Him, to walk in the light and be children of the light. But first, we must trust that the darkness did not overcome the light then, and it won't ever overcome the light. Jesus showed us that death and darkness never get the last word. Light and life always are at the end. Now, one of my favorite lines is from a movie called The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. Maybe you've seen it. And as a minister, I'm always looking, I hear things differently, and I'm always listening for what can preach, so to speak. But in that movie, one of the main characters says, "We have a saying in India, everything will be all right in the end. If it is not all right, it is not yet the end." And that is what God tells us. If it is not all right, if there is not life, then it is not yet the end. And when we begin to trust that the Word actually has the last word, then we begin to do what Jesus did. We begin to overcome darkness with light. And as Martin Luther King Jr. said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So when we begin to trust and do what Jesus did, we begin to practice the way of light. We begin to practice these things: hope, and peace and love and joy. We begin to be patient and kind. We begin to create beauty, and we become light in a dark world. God showed us this in Genesis 1, and Jesus showed us this by his life and death and resurrection. Light and life always, always, always get the last word. So why are we afraid? God has been bringing light out of darkness since the beginning of time. Why are we afraid? Jesus made the waters be still. Have we still no faith? The ball is in our court. We must decide to trust, and we must decide to act on this trust, and we must choose to practice love and compassion and peace and forgiveness in the middle of chaos. We must choose to be children of light. Amen and amen.